All right, so hi again, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. And I'll jump right into the session. I'm really excited to be talking about deploying web applications with Azure Static Web Apps. And before we actually start the session and see what's in store for us, a little bit about myself. So my name is Nishu Goel, and I work as an engineer at the company called The DataWorks. I'm also recognized as a Google developer expert and a C Sharp Corner MVP. Thank you, C Sharp Corner, for that. And the agenda, the session today looks mostly like this. So I'm going to start by talking about what Azure App Service, the static web app service, helps us to do, and how it has made the lives of us developers really easy. With the aim to do everything from one place without having to go to either Azure or GitHub or different front end applications. The second part that we look at is how to quicken our development process using Visual Studio Code and how it is integrated with different extensions and how it would make the whole process seamless for us until the deployment part of it. So I'll mostly do all of this using a demo, doing a demo. So I hope you understand bits and pieces of it during the demo. So let's start right away. So the first thing that I would say is that if you are into the world of web, if you are developing web applications, you would know that JavaScript is currently ruling the world of web, and there are so many web frameworks out there like Angular, React, Svelte, Vue. There are so many different frameworks out there, so it's completely your choice which one framework you want to go with, or what is exactly the requirement of the project that you're trying to build. So that's the front end part of it. What Azure Static Services, the Azure Static Web Apps extension allows you to do from the Visual Studio Code IDE is that the first thing, you create your front-end application using any framework that we just talked about. The second part about is having a backend, right? Now, for people like me who are kind of newbies into backend, who don't understand, the architecture of a backend application, be it a Node.js application or a Go-based application, if we don't understand that, we are really confused about where to place the API folder. Do I create a serverless backend? Do I know where to place the API folder in my application? Well, I really don't know that. And I really want to, rely on something to be doing this for me. And that's when Azure Static Web Apps again come into picture and help us with a serverless backend. And we'll actually look in the demo and see how we can actually do that. So there are two parts to it. First, building the front-end application. Second, being able to integrate it with the backend, but then using a service which helps us to do that. So the second part of the demo would be about how you can integrate everything from within your VS Code IDE, which is all our web developers' favorite IDE, right? So yeah, we'll be building a front end application first. I'll be using React, very small demo React application for the front end part of it. Then we'll see how we can actually integrate it with the backend, and I'll use the GitHub API for that, the GitHub Avatar API for that. And then finally, we'll come to the deployment part of it. And we'll also see how from within VS Code, you can actually do CI/CD, continuous integration and deployment on your project, on your application that you're building, and be able to deploy it on Azure. So I am sure it would be interesting for you, being able to do everything from your IDE, not going to GitHub, not going to Azure for that, but then everything in one place. So this is a quick walkthrough about what I'll be doing, and then we'll actually start doing that. So I'm going to start off with a create React app application, which will be a basic landing page like this, which just says that edit the app.js file and the default landing page of a React application. We'll do that first. Then the second part is getting the extensions required inside our Visual Studio Code IDE to be able to dealing with either a serverless backend or to be able to use Azure Static Web Apps and have the Azure connection with our GitHub or with our Visual Studio Code IDE. The next thing would be to see how actually we integrate the serverless backend. So we'll walk through that, and we'll see how all of it is placed inside an API folder, which like right now sounds strange to me, but then let's have a look at how actually to do that. The next part would be to connecting it to the Azure portal, wherein you would, switch into the deployment side of it, and you'll see that the app that you just developed, you would run it through the continuous integration process. You would run it through the continuous deployment process, and then finally deploy it to Azure. And by the end of the presentation, you would be able to see an application actually deployed on Azure. So the process kind of looks like this. This is a very quick walkthrough of things that we'll be doing. So the first snapshot that you see here is Visual Studio Code asking you about the location of your application code. So where do you want to place your React code in this case, for example? So that will be at the root of your application, because you want the React code, the index.html, which is the main landing page for your application, to appear on the deployed instance. The second thing that it would ask you is that where do you want to place your Azure Functions code, which is the serverless backend code. And that's where you mention the folder that you have created manually, or maybe you have used Azure Functions to create it for you within the API folder. Then the next thing would be Visual Studio Code actually asking you what is the path of your build folder, the files that get generated after you build your application. And that's when you would specify build in the case of a React application. But then if you're using an Angular application, there is this dist folder that is generated once you build your application. So considering the framework that you're using for your front-end development, you can specify all these requirements that Visual Studio asks you for. The next thing is about deploying it to the GitHub and using CI/CD, and then finally deploying it to Azure. That's where, again, you see no screenshots of either GitHub or Azure, right? This is because Visual Studio Code is actually doing all of this for you. So the first thing that it asks you is that enter a name for your static web app, that the name with which you want to see your application on Azure. So you enter some name according to what you want. And the next thing that it would ask you related to Azure is that what proxy region, the region that you want to enter your application into, and then deploy it there. So that also is integrated within the VS Code. You can specify any location from here, and your application will be deployed there. When you actually do that, you will come to the GitHub Actions part of it, which is exactly like the build pipeline that you might have seen in Azure DevOps, for example. So you have this pipeline that starts running once you push your code to the main branch that is connected with the pipeline. So the same thing we have here in GitHub Actions. And just like Azure Static Web Apps was announced at Microsoft Build 2020, GitHub Actions was announced a little before that. And the idea was to be able to integrate, the front-end applications with GitHub Actions in process, and then finally deploying it to Azure with the help of all of these things. And finally, the extension that was announced at Build 2020, which is Azure Static Web Apps. So as you can see here, it's running many tasks. It's setting up the job, it's building the pipeline, it's running the required actions, and then it finally deploys and runs the actions required. When the job is completed, it should finally go to Azure and create an instance of our application where it is finally deployed. So you would be able to see like something like this in the resource that is created for you. This is the name of your the application that the instance where your application is deployed. And as you can see the URL here, it's something called Gentle Bush and some random numbers there, right? So you can use this URL to be able to see your application now. Now, when you actually go to that URL that was randomly generated for you, you would see something like this. So this is the React code and the simple landing page, the default React application that you created, and ran it through the GitHub Actions process, ran it through the Azure connectivity process, ran it through the Azure Functions process, and then you were able to deploy it to the Azure instance. So let's jump right in and do that before we go to the final part of it. So I'll go back here and open my terminal quickly. So let's expand this. This is here. Yeah, so let me clear this quickly and see what's here. There's nothing. I'll increase the size of this so that you're able to see this properly. So yeah, I want to create first a basic React application, and I'll use the package create React app for that. But you might be wondering that, okay, do you need to even install the package to be able to create a React application first? Well, you actually don't need to do that. So I don't have the create React app package inside my system. So what I would do is I would simply link to npm and try to use create React app from there. So we can use the npx command that you see here to be able to link to npm, create React app, and then give any name to my application. Let's call it Azure Conf, right? So I'm using npx create React app here, and this basically starts creating the application for me. While that happens, let's go to Visual Studio Code, expand it a bit. And the next task for us is to get the necessary extensions that we need, right? So I'll go to the extensions icon here. And the first thing that I needed is the Azure Static Web Apps, right? So Azure Static Web Apps. Okay, I think this is something to do with the internet. Let's just check if there's any problem with the internet. This is working properly. All right. Let's try again. All right, so there seems to be some problem with the extensions marketplace, but the idea is to get 3 extensions in your bucket. The first is the Azure Static Web Apps extension, which is Azure Static Web Apps. The first link that is done, the next extension that you would need, actually I can show that to you here and it loads now. So you see I have loaded this, I have downloaded this extension, Azure Static Web Apps, which is in preview right now. And if you've not installed it, you would see an install button like this. Otherwise, you would have it here, just like I have it. And once you install it, you would see an icon like this of Azure in your Visual Studio Code. The idea is to integrate your VS Code and GitHub with the Azure extension. Once that is done, the next thing it would ask you is to, as it says, the extension wants to sign in using GitHub, because the idea is to connect it to GitHub Actions so that your CI/CD is in place and you're finally able to deploy to Azure. So you authorize GitHub to be able to use your Visual Studio Code and the extension within it. So when that is done, you would see something like this. So you see Static Web App extension here, and the plus icon is to finally deploy some application that you have, and all your subscriptions will be appearing here. This flash kind of an icon that you see here is to integrate your Azure functions or any HTTP function, as it says here, create HTTP function. So this is the extension that we're going to use about that. Then this is the extension that is the other thing. So let's go again to the extensions and type in Azure functions. So you see this extension about Azure functions. This is the one that would help you integrate your front-end application with a serverless backend, and then you can simply use it for any HTTP trigger or any HTTP function that you want to associate with your front-end application. Now, when that is also done, the third thing, if you need, is to get the Azure database extension as well, which would deal with your database, either CosmoDB or SQL or any other database, and then you can get all the details about the tables in your database, all in Visual Studio Code. So you don't need to go to your database to get that. So this is again very useful if you're dealing with databases. When you have these extensions, these 3 extensions, mainly Static Web Apps, Azure Functions, and the one about the database, if you have these 3 in your bucket, the task is very seamless for you, because then Visual Studio Code takes it all over it to be doing the thing that you're trying to do. So let's go back, and assuming that our application is created, okay, it is still creating. So there seems to be some problem with the network. All right, so yeah, let's wait for this to be created. Instead, we can actually open any other application that is already created. So let's clear this quickly, and let me check. Let's open this demo application that is check until our new application gets created. So I'll open it in Visual Studio Code. Yeah, so forget this API folder for now and look at the front-end code that's generated for us. Let me close this file. Yeah, so as you can see, you have this index.js file, which is the kind of the entry file to your React application. You have service worker, which deals with the offline rendering of your application. So if you're interested in showing a customized message when your, for example, internet ditches you in between and starts showing that Chrome Dino, you don't want to show that for your application, and you decide to have a customized message saying that maybe your internet connectivity is not as expected or something like that. So service worker will help you to do that offline rendering. And you might want to check more about progressive web applications, PWAs, which allow you to deal with service workers and give many more other features to your application. So yeah, this is your React application. Now, when your front end code is ready, this would just open the basic landing page of your default React application. When this is done, the next task that you want to do is to integrate it with the backend. So you go to Azure Functions here, and now you want to have an API, right? You want to have a serverless backend in your application. So as you can see, static web applications here, this extension, and this flash icon. So when I click on this flash icon here, this is still loading. So let's wait a bit for that. Correct. So when I click on this flash icon, it asks me that provide a unique, HTTP function name for your API. So let me just call it get GitHub avatar, because that's what I'm trying to do. And as you see, I have already used a API inside my application because this is a demo application. So let's see what is that API that is created. So if you go here, I have this GitHub avatar. Let me just close this and close this as well. All right, let's leave that. Yeah, so let's see this one. So we have this API get GitHub avatar, which is integrated as a serverless backend inside our front-end application. And if you go in here, the index.ts file, you would see that the idea is to just get the query, the API from GitHub, use it for querying on your avatars on your GitHub, and then you can do your manual code here to get the whatever thing that you're trying to get from your GitHub API. In here, it's very simple about getting the GitHub avatar, and then you can show that on the UI if you need. But you see how the API folder within which the serverless backend exists about all the files related to the backend is integrated with our front-end application. Now, when that is done, we have our front-end and the backend code available here. The next thing for us is to be able to integrate it to GitHub. So we have the serverless backend, we have the front-end code as well. The next thing is to go to GitHub now. But do we actually need to go to GitHub, or just Visual Studio Code should help us with that, right? So let's quickly have a look if our code is generated now. Well, it has now, right? So I'll quickly open this new code editor. I mean, this new code base that we have. Let's close this. And yeah, let's go into this file that we have created, the folder. It's called Azure Conf. Let's open this and also run this. So we'll add the Azure function to this quickly. Again, for that, we'll have to go to the extension here, the Azure icon, and you can see the app is running here. We can have a look at that later. When I click on this flash icon, it would prompt me again to add an API to my application. Let's try if that loads in time. Yeah, so I can quickly add it here, get GitHub avatar. And it asks me which language I want to use, so I'll go with TypeScript. And you would see that Visual Studio Code starts showing you that it's creating a new project within my front-end application. And you can see that now in the front-end code, I have this API folder, which is about the avatar and the get GitHub API. But it is importing from this Azure Functions package, which we have not installed inside our application yet. So we would need to add that to our code base as well, right? So let's quickly go in here and come out of it. Yarn, I'm using the Yarn package manager. So I'll do yarn add @Azure/functions. So when this package is added, I should have no errors remaining in my application, which is kind of existing here now for now. So let's wait for this. Great. So it's added in the package now, and you can see that there's no error remaining inside our application now. So let's quickly go and integrate it with GitHub. For that, the first thing that we need to do is add all our code that is here to GitHub. So for that, we need to create a repository, right? So let's go to, you can see, first of all, that our React application, the landing page is created. Now, the next task is to push all my code to GitHub. So I'll quickly go to GitHub. I'll just say repo.new. Now, this is very interesting, and I really like this concept of these .new domains, right? So you can see that I just did repo.new and it opened GitHub for me. I didn't have to type like github.com/Nishu Goel to be able to create a new repository. I could just do repo.new. There are many other interesting domains like that. So you would see this .new, and this would create a new just GitHub just for you. And you can also do story.new. So for example, if you're planning to write your own blog, right? So just do story.new and it will open a new story on Medium for you. So this is a very interesting thing. And there are many more .new domains you might be interested in. All right, so let's create a repository. Let's call it Azure Conf, NISHU. This is the name of our repository. Let's simply create it without changing anything else. Pick it up from here. Let's go to the terminal. Let's check the status of our code right now. Add everything in here. Let's commit this to saying any message. For example, initial code for deploy. When that is done, I want to add a remote origin. Git remote add origin. So where do I want to add that? In here. So let's check now. Git remote -v. And let's simply push our code, right? Git push origin master. When my code is all pushed to the GitHub repository, the next thing that we want to do is to see if we can deploy our application to GitHub now. Azure now. So all of our code is here. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code quickly and go into the Azure icon again here. Now I'm trying to deploy my application. So you see this plus icon here. This is very important to understand that the flash icon is actually to create a HTTP function. But then this plus icon here, the small icon next to our static web app extension, is about actually creating a static web app and deploying it on Azure. So I click on this plus icon. I can use any of these subscriptions. The reason I have these two subscriptions here is very important. So I'll at a later stage, I'll tell you why is that so. So I'll choose the, for example, free trial subscription for now. They say enter a name for the static web app. So let's call it Azure Conf again, and Goel, right? This is the name. It asks me the branch. So let's call it master, the location of my application code. So this is exactly as per the snapshots that you saw in the slides, sometime before, right? So this is the location of my Azure Functions code now, which is API. Then it's asking me the build path, which will be inside the build folder. Again, it's asking me the location where we want to deploy. So I'll simply use East US2. And now, as you see here, it says creating resource group, creating new static web app. But then it's taking some time. Let's wait for it. It's basically trying to create a static web app for our application. And as you see, it has created this, the name that I gave for my application. One important thing to note here is that when you click on this plus and it gives you different subscriptions, you might see that the subscription that you have is not allowed to use the namespace called Microsoft.web. So you might want to have to go to Azure portal and then register the provider called Microsoft.web to be able to use the static web app extension. So when I was doing it for the first time, I struggled for like 1 to 2 hours because I was not sure how to register a provider. So this is something that you might want to consider. Now my application is created, and if I reload this, I want to go to the actions, and you can see this actions part here, which has started the pipeline for me. 1 in progress, 1 queued job. So if I go to this task here, this job here, the whole process is running here, which is about the triggering the pipeline, then building the whole code that we have pushed, and then running the pipeline. Once this is deployed, you would see an instance on the Azure portal. So just to check the instance name, we would go to the Azure portal here. And this is some connection error. All right. So the resources that you see here, right? Inside these resources, you would see your new application. And let me try to reload this. Yeah. So our code is still running, so you would not be able to see the the React application already pushed in here, but we can see a reference application. For example, this one, right? Check MS build. So let's click on this one. And if you, yeah, so you can see this URL here, right? Let me quickly just zoom this a bit so that you're able to see better. So yeah, this is the URL. This is the place where your application will be deployed finally. And if you go back where all your resources are listed down, you would see that this has been triggered now. Remember, it was showing 1 hour ago, but this has been triggered now, and our pipeline has been completed, it seems. So yeah, this has been almost done. So if we go to the Azure portal, it has been triggered. And now when I go inside this and try to access the URL, if the whole pipeline is completed, it will show me the React app. Otherwise, it will show me a landing page. But it seems that it is created. And this is the URL where you can access your React application, which you just pushed. So yeah, you see how from your Visual Studio Code, you could create a front-end application. You could add the serverless backend to it. The next step was to add CI/CD, which was the pipeline that was created here. And then, it started running all your code in here. So since it has finished the deployment process, and you can see this here, the status also has succeeded. So yeah, all your code has been completed and your pipeline has run finally, and you can see the change in here in all your resources, and we finally able to see the deployed application on whatever random name this is, which is generated for you. Obviously you can change this random name that is generated for you, but yeah, that's a custom domain name that you can use here. So yeah, that's about creating your application and then adding a serverless backend to it, and then being able to use CI/CD through GitHub Actions, which is exactly how Azure DevOps works, using a pipeline, and then finally see your application on Azure. Now, one question that I'm sure that you would be coming in your mind is that if Microsoft has done this static web apps extension, why was it not done for Azure DevOps, and why for GitHub Actions? And so the reason behind this was that, since most of the developers are on GitHub and people are trying it there, the first platform that they chose was GitHub. And if you're thinking that would it be up for Azure DevOps, then yeah, this is in the pipeline, and Microsoft might surprise us very soon about this integrated with Azure DevOps as well. So yes, that's pretty much it. And sorry about the delays, about the connection and everything. But yeah, thank you very much for joining today. And you can connect with me. And if you face any problems while actually trying this out by yourself, you can reach out to me and we can do this together. So thank you very much.